On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 took off from Jakarta. 13 minutes later, 189 people were dead. The plane crashed into the Java Sea because of a software system the pilots had never been told existed. 5 months later, on March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 3002 took off from Addis Ababa. 6 minutes after takeoff, 157 more people were dead. The exact same flaw, the exact same software. Boeing had 5 months between the two crashes to ground the plane. They did not. Instead, Boeing's CEO appeared on television and said the plane was safe. Meanwhile, investigators found internal Boeing messages from years earlier where engineers described the plane as, and I'm quoting directly, designed by clowns, who are in turn supervised by monkeys. 346 people died, and the man who ran Boeing during both crashes walked away with $62 million. Nobody went to jail. Not one person. This is not a story about a plane crash. This is a story about what happens when a company decides that Boeing was founded in Seattle in 1916. For most of its history, it was run by engineers who were obsessed with aircraft. The culture was simple: build the safest plane possible, and the profits will follow. That changed on August 1st, 1997. Boeing merged with McDonnell Douglas, a company that had been struggling financially and was run not by engineers but by cost-cutters. What happened next was documented in congressional investigations and reported across dozens of outlets. The bean counters won. In 2001, Boeing moved its corporate headquarters from Seattle, where the planes are built, to Chicago. A deliberate message. Leadership no longer needed to be near the factories or the engineers. Between 2013 and 2019, Boeing spent $43 billion buying back its own stock. $43 billion. Not on new safety systems. Not on engineering talent. On stock buybacks that enriched shareholders and executives holding stock options. And when Airbus released its fuel-efficient A320neo in 2010, Boeing faced a choice. Build a new plane from scratch, which would take a decade and cost billions, or modify the existing 737, a design from 1967, to fit larger engines. They chose the shortcut. The 737 MAX was born. And to hide the aerodynamic, MCAS stands for Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Here's what it did. If a single sensor detected the plane's nose was pitching up too steeply, MCAS would automatically push the nose down. Not controllable by the pilots. Automatic. The problem was it relied on one sensor, just one. Boeing's own internal document from 2015 asked, "Are we vulnerable to single AOA sensor failures with the MCAS implementation?" The answer was yes. They shipped the plane anyway. And then Boeing did something extraordinary. They hid MCAS from pilots entirely. It was not in the flight manual. There was no training for it. Instead of requiring simulator training, which would have cost Boeing customers hundreds of millions of dollars, Boeing successfully lobbied the FAA to classify the MAX as a variant of the old 737. Pilots got an hour-long iPad course. That was it. The man responsible for getting FAA approval for pilot training was Boeing's chief technical pilot, Mark Faulkner. In 2016, during simulator tests, Faulkner watched MCAS behave dangerously, triggering in situations it wasn't supposed to. He sent an internal message to a colleague. "This is a shit show. I basically lied to the regulators, unknowingly." He also wrote, "I'll be thrown in jail." Boeing knew. The FAA was not told. 2 years later, 189 people flew on a plane with a system designed by people who called themselves. Paul Njoroge boarded a different flight. His wife, 3 children, ages 2, 4, and 9, and his mother-in-law boarded Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. 6 people from one family. Paul survived only because he was not on the same plane. He has testified before Congress multiple times, demanding criminal prosecution of Boeing executives. His words, "My children died because of decisions made by people who are still free today." Samia Stumo was 24 years old. She was a healthcare consultant flying to a work conference in Nairobi. Her father, Michael Stumo, became one of the most prominent victim advocates. When Boeing's CEO was fired and walked away with $62 million, Stumo said, "He was fired for poor performance and he should be treated like any other production employee who gets fired for poor performance." Zipporah Curia lost her father, Joseph Curia Waithaka, on the same flight. She compared her father to the Boeing CEO directly. "Muilenburg and my dad were the same age. Two people. One is a privileged person who gets away with having such a big part to play in the death of so many people, and the other who trusts a product and dies for it." 157 people died on Ethiopian Airlines, 302 alone. 35 nationalities. UN Environment Assembly delegates, humanitarian workers, families, students, all killed by a software system that was hidden from the crew flying the plane. John Barnett spent 32 years at Boeing. He started in 1985. His final posting was at Boeing's 787 Dreamliner plant in Charleston, South Carolina. In 2017, he discovered something alarming. 25% of the emergency oxygen systems on 787s being built would fail to deliver oxygen in an emergency. He reported it to management. He was stonewalled. He went directly to the FAA. Boeing's own internal investigation ultimately confirmed the malfunction. The FAA ordered corrective action. His reward, retaliation. A senior manager downgraded his employment level for leaving a written record of safety violations. He filed a whistleblower complaint. After a 4-year investigation, OSHA closed it in Boeing's favor. He appealed. The legal battle continued for years. In March 2024, John Barnett was in Charleston for his third day of depositions in his whistleblower lawsuit against Boeing. He had seemed in good spirits. He had lunch plans. He had notes prepared for his continued testimony. That morning, he did not appear for his deposition. A hotel staff member heard a gunshot. At 10 a.m., his attorney called asking for a wellness check. John Barnett was found dead in his truck in the hotel parking lot. Single gunshot wound to the head. His legally owned pistol was in his hand. A note was found. The Charleston County coroner ruled the death a suicide. His attorneys and family expressed public doubt. On December 23, 2019, 1 week before Christmas, Boeing's board of directors fired CEO Dennis Muilenburg. He had presided over both crashes. He had appeared on television saying the plane was safe after 157 people were already dead. He had resisted grounding the plane for 5 months between crashes. He was fired, and he was contractually entitled to $62.2 million. He forfeited approximately $14 million in performance stock. He walked away with the rest, roughly $47 million. Senator Elizabeth Warren put it simply: 346 people died, and yet Dennis Muilenburg pressured regulators and put profits ahead of safety. He'll walk away with $62.2 million. This is corruption, plain and simple. The man who replaced him was Dave Calhoun, who had been Boeing's own board chairman when the crashes happened. The same board that failed to stop the MAX crisis promoted its own chairman to fix it. In 2022, Calhoun received $22.5 million in total compensation. In early 2023, Boeing gave him an additional $5.29 million in restricted stock just to keep him in the chair. Then, on January 5, 2024, 5 years after the MAX crashes were supposed to have been fixed, a door plug blew off a Boeing 737 MAX 9 at 16,000 feet. A child's shirt was sucked off. A 16-year-old boy was nearly pulled out of the plane. Only his seatbelt saved him. The plane had 4 missing bolts. They had been removed at Boeing's factory and never reinstalled. Nothing had changed. On January 7, 2021, the Department of Justice reached a settlement with Boeing. Boeing was charged with conspiracy to defraud the United States, specifically defrauding the FAA during the 737 MAX certification. The deal: a deferred prosecution agreement. Prosecution paused for 3 years if Boeing complied with conditions. The fine: $2.5 billion. Broken down: $243 million in criminal penalty, $1.77 billion to airline customers, and $500 million to a victim beneficiaries fund. 346 deaths. $500 million. That works out to roughly 1.4 million per life. Boeing's market cap at the time of the deal was over $100 billion. Zero executives were charged. Zero individuals faced criminal liability. Mark Faulkner, the chief technical pilot who wrote the "Designed by Clowns" messages, was the only individual ever indicted. He was acquitted in March 2022. In July 2024, the DOJ found Boeing had violated the terms of the 2021 agreement and announced Boeing would plead guilty to felony fraud. In December 2024, a federal judge rejected the proposed guilty plea deal. As of 2025, Boeing's legal fate remains unresolved. 346 people died. One company was charged. No executives, no individuals. The only person criminally tried was acquitted. Boeing was once the most respected aircraft manufacturer in the world. It built the 747, which democratized air travel. It built the planes that connected the planet. That Boeing was run by engineers who understood that safety and quality were the same thing. That Boeing died when the bean counters took over. When the headquarters moved away from the factories. When $43 billion went to stock buybacks instead of engineering. When a software system was hidden from pilots to avoid a training cost. When one engineer's warning about a single sensor was filed away. When a CEO went on television and called a crashed plane safe. Paul Njoroge lost his wife, his 3 children, and his mother-in-law. 6 people from one family. He has sat in front of Congress and asked a simple question. Why is no one in prison? The answer, as of 2026, is the same as it was the day they died, because no one in power decided they should be. The 346 people on Lion Air 610 and Ethiopian Airlines 302 did not die in an accident. They died because a series of choices were made, by named people, at named companies, in named boardrooms, that put the cost of simulator training above the value of human life. Those people are still free. Some of them are still rich. And the plane, with repairs, is still flying. If this story made you angry, it should. Share it with someone who flies. Share it with someone who thinks corporations are held accountable. If you want to know more, the families of victims run advocacy organizations that are still fighting for criminal prosecution. Links are in the description. And if you want to understand the next system quietly deciding your life is worth less than a quarterly earnings report, subscribe. We cover the stories that most people never hear. The next one is coming.